Oh, thank you all so much for coming out. It is very, very meaningful to me, and it's very, very meaningful to both of us here on stage that you are here. Thank you so much. Before we start, just going to give you a little bit of a rundown. One, the show is 90 minutes, which is just over my threshold for allowing people to leave to use the restroom. So if you ever have to do that, please feel free to go ahead. Just pick a good moment where there's lots of lights and not the blackout. Thank you. Second thing I want to tell you, thank you so much to Lynx Hall for having us. It is truly an honor and a delight to be here and to present in this space. It has been a total dream to work here. Three, if you have money in your pockets and you want to spend that money after the show, I have two suggestions for you. The first is we have a lovely bar outside. Grab a drink. Grab me a drink. Do whatever you need to do in order to get cash and then pay and tip your bartenders. The second option, which is slightly more literary, is we have a book. I have worked with Matchbooks Press, which is the wonderful and incredible Lauren Zallow, who is here with us tonight. So this has the script as well as a bunch of research notes, errata, and addenda. So if you liked the show and you want to get more into it, that's there. If you hated the show and you want to give it another shot, that's there. We are selling it for $20 a pop, which is truly a steal, and that price will be inflated after tonight's performance. Other things I need to tell you, the piece is called The New Prairie School, which is of course in reference to the old Prairie School, which is a style of architecture. It was prominent around the turn of the century, so this is late 1800s and early 1900s. Frank Lloyd Wright is the most famous practitioner of the Prairie style, although there were other architects involved in the movement. The Prairie style is seen in some ways as a sort of a reaction against like aesthetics of architecture on the East Coast at around the same time. There's a lot of old money on the East Coast building new buildings that look like old buildings, right? So it's like lots of like classical style, lots of like inflected by European aristocracy. But in the Midwest, there was a lot of new money. That new money was a lot of interest in building sort of new buildings. And so the Prairie style architects were there to create sort of a North American aesthetic. It's like a little bit of a journey away from the classical aesthetic, which is also represented by the words there. And towards like a more American style, whatever that may be. The Prairie style was also very influenced by the arts and crafts movement, in terms of design style. Like about a decade prior. So, we talked for like 2 hours. It was super nice. Arts and crafts, we talked about it was all about like handmade, about some of the numbers that are still made iterations tonight, just in this whatever.
And we saw this movie that had a lot to do with the of places that were really connected to a place and bound to a place.
What's more powerful, keeping the name and changing the definition, or keeping the definition and changing the name?
Being able to understand the relationship.
The Prairie style primarily centers around
or can we do a different thing? We read that again.
I'm not thinking about it. We know like we love modern because we happen to be Western.
I think that there needs to be said. I think there's like a lot of things that I feel very insecure about.
Other people already described art to me. I'm not really sure. This is the point where I'm going to tell you just some of the small things like a lot that I for example, even my room, this is more or less the way that I talk. I don't usually talk this loudly or believe this much when I'm talking about these things or really anything else. And I'm not really sure about the application of study. You have to ask them directly. Maybe this is a good time to do that. But they might talk this loud. I'm not really sure. I don't even know if they talk about frankly what I'm talking about. But I can tell you this. I'll let you later on the show. We can try to see if we can better answers. And maybe then you
Oh.
will, the Kansas election of 1892. The newly elected governor from the Populist Party in his inaugural address says the rich have no right to the property of the poor. But due to a clerical error, both the Populists and the Republicans claim a majority in the House of Representatives. The following February, 1893, the World's Fair opens here in Chicago, and the Kansas Populists lock themselves in the House chambers who will not be the only anarchist takeover of the United States legislative body. They hold the room for a night before men with hammers come in the morning to take them away. The last thing they say before they're carted away is, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all for me.
Oh, thank you for calling 1-800-PARKING, your parking solution experts at Lot USA. Are you an existing customer? Press 1. Would you like to create a new account? Press 2. Thanks for pressing that 2. All we need is your name, the name of your hometown. The mayor of your hometown's first name, his social security number, and the mayor's daughter's biggest crush's social security number. Thank you, and now we're ready to create your parking lot. Would you like 1 to 100 spaces? Press 1. Would you like 101 to 500 spaces? Press 2. Would you like 501 to 1,000? Press 1. 1,001 to 10,000? Press 2. Now, if you need more than 100,000 spaces, press 1. If you just want them, press 1. If you'd like it to construct around the business, do nothing. If you'd like it to construct around your home, please hold. If you'd like the construction to go on indefinitely, say okay. If you'd like it to eventually complete itself, say anything other than okay, okay? Okay. Hello? Make a sound if you're still there. Hello? Hello?
I wonder if about a house that it stands. 1, 2, 3, 4. A thing that isn't talked enough about Frank Lloyd Wright is that he was quite old when he was building a lot of his most famous buildings. He spent 50 years of his life living and working in Chicago in a style of architecture that became known as the Prairie School. 50 years of his life on this, and he started to get bored. In 1914, the Debs House, constructed in Kalamazoo, Michigan, on the banks of the Kalamazoo River. It's a building in the shape of a triangle, its hypotenuse extending just above the water line. But Wright doesn't factor in the fact that the river floods, and so after the first big rain, the whole house falls into the current and floats towards the factory downstream. Wright declares it his last prairie house and says a wonderful thing about a prairie is that sometimes it catches fire. I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all. I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all for me. Yeah.
The kids have shut the doors, my friends, and I'll tell you the lawns are shorn so tight out there that even the bones are aching. And I know what you're thinking, but all I can tell you is that even if you climb to the very tip top, all you'll have to bring to the party is blisters. And I know you're wondering, you want to know, is it bigger than a bread box? Does it weigh more than a pound of butter? In winds of 136 to 165 miles an hour, will the roof hold up? If the beard is the prairie grass, is he the field mouse? Or the hawk? Does he prefer his corn intact or ground to dust? Where is his shirt from? Where is his grandmother, and how does she take her tea? You are wondering, are they wearing their parachutes? Did they remember the map? When the time comes, will they take me back to the land of all our grand people, when it was just the smell of the air and the feel of the grass on our ankles at dawn in a prairie in Kansas, waiting on windmills?
The 1990s, a Kansas man named David Bodden gathers with 500 people in a thrift shop owned by his parents. They're there to cast votes in a papal election. David believes that Vatican II nullified the Catholic Church, made it incorrect in the eyes of God, and so there hasn't been a really real Catholic Pope in the 50-some years since Vatican II. So these 6 people cast votes, and David Bodden is elected the new Pope of Kansas in a thrift shop. And in his first inaugural sermon as Pope, he says, "Our lives are a perpetual denial of our faiths. We open doors to find rooms filled ankle deep with water.
We tell ourselves stories that are most convenient, that we think are true, like the ceiling must have a hole in it, like the waterbed must be broken, like at least there will be plants that grow from the carpet now. But we forget that we choose these stories. And so a little bit of self-reflection, with intention, say it with me.
I brought the water in. I brought all of these buckets and I filled them up. I brought the water into this room and I filled it, ankle deep. It was easy to do. I brought the water in. It was easy to do. I brought the water in.
There are no stories to be trusted, so join with me in song. You want a pliable, painterly, soft-spoken, and right. I'm at the point where all I need is just a space for the night. We have dreams, and in those dreams we are together at last. We both agree that those dreams, they belong in the past. You want a pliable, painterly, soft-spoken, patient, and right. I'm at the point where all I need is just a space for the night. We have dreams, and in those dreams we are together at last. We both agree that those dreams, they belong in the past.
Hi everybody, I'm Corey,
Hi, I'm Claire.
Hi, I'm Ethan.
and welcome to the new PRAIRIE School. The next part of our piece is something that we are calling a knee. What is a knee? I'm glad you asked. A knee is a joint. A knee connects two larger structural components so that a whole thing could stand. Many people you might know have two knees. We here at the new PRAIRIE School have 19 of them. If you look in your program, thank you for laughing, I love that line. If you look in your program, you can find the titles for each of our knees. So Claire, Ethan, and I have worked over the past 4 months or so to create these short, about 1-minute performances. The way a knee will work, there will be 5 of them during tonight's show. We will go to this bingo cage on my right, your left. We will roll that bingo cage. In that bingo cage are balls with the numbers 1 through 19 on them. We will check it against our chart so that we know we're performing the right knee. We will announce the title of that knee and perform it for you. Please note that these are not improvised, these are rehearsed pieces, although the beginning or ending or middle of them might be a little improvised, they might be a little slippery. The only other thing you need to know is that in your program are listed 10 knees for each of us that are fake knees. Please ignore those. Those are not important. We will not reference them for the rest of the show. Those are knees that we did not write. Any questions? Great. Okay, cool. Without further ado, here are our knees.
This is 2 yardsticks and a full-grown sunflower.
This is 1001 Afternoons in Chicago.
This is Crook County. really, you can keep that. Like, I'm not gonna. It's at the corner of Woodlawn and 58th, built from 1908 to 1909, and widely considered a masterpiece of the Prairie style. It unfolds along a single axis, stepping downward and outward from the massive central core of the chimney in a complex series of overlapping horizontal planes. It's a building that is saturated with the idea of horizon. It's built wide and long, and even the mortar used to put the bricks together is darker on the longer side of the brick. Not a wall, but parallel lines. Not lines, but stranger than that. The interior, one continuous room, all rooms the same room, all speak together. A fireplace at the center, permitting an uninterrupted flow of space along a length of French doors, which, depending on the location of the observer, become either part of the living room or the dining room. The ceiling passes through the upper part of the chimney and continues into the adjoining room. All rooms the same room, all speak together. Wooden strips attached to the ceiling echo the shapes of doors and windows. A ceiling made of doors and windows. Frank was so prescriptive and demanding that all of the furniture inside of the house had to be approved of by him. Forms, materials, patterns, decoration, all designed meticulously. Chairs as tall grass thrones around a table that sinks into the mud. Glass patterns whose long diagonals form kaleidoscopic diamonds in their brief intersections. And the lamps, they look like small roofs. And the roof, the most critical, most Wrightian element of the house. From his feeling of lost prairie, he abstracted the length and horizon as his dominant and reoccurring motif. His great stylistic marker was the cantilever, a roof that projects past the wall, stretches the view out a little further. This long roof, and its extension of the horizon yet, yes, but also a long line of shelter from the Midwestern experience, against the alternating extremes of hot and cold. Frank called his houses organic, meaning that they were of a place, not just on a place, meaning that the Roby house overlooked an open field that stretched from 58th to the Midway, meaning that flatness, that horizon, wasn't just a thing around the house, but it was the house. It was radical and geometric. And it meant that this plot, this street, this city, this state, this place, was the kind of geography that moves water around, one of the fingers that God buried underground. The Roby house sits near a continental divide, and so when rain falls on the house, it takes two paths. One to the Mississippi, and the other to Lake Michigan, out to the St. Lawrence. On a rainy day, you can catch water in the middle of the roof dancing. It just collects up there, holds onto the sky for a little bit longer until the signal comes and the water rushes off the roof in sheets. The ironwork of the window is just visible through this new sheet of falling glass, and that glass hits the ground. It travels all the way west, to Chicago, the Des Plaines, the Kankakee, to the Illinois, and finally to the Mississippi. Its fingers rummage through the dirt and find all the things we left for it to grow. Or else that glass takes a different direction and joins the lake water. And soon Lake Michigan is filled with glass vials, things for small looking. And now the lake makes the same sound all the boats did at night. From here to Michigan, my home state can do the same things I can because sound travels faster in air. So I say something and it reaches the place I was born in two waves. First, and the glass shaking a little, and then my voice. Now just a hum of static across 118 miles. Boats break the glass lake. Fish curl their way through. Rain freckles trickle down to the bottom of the vials. New sounds that need new names. And down at the bottom of the lake, a new lake starts.
This is Invisible Cities. Gods of two species protect the city of Leandra. Both are too tiny to be seen and too numerous to be counted. One species stands at the doors of the houses, inside, next to the coat rack, and the umbrella stand.
Would you all agree with me that we know everybody's
They
age
follow
in
the
this room
families and
except
install
one person?
themselves in the new home
Is that one person
at the
me?
consignment of the skis.
If I'm telling the truth so far, hang on, it gets a lot
The
better.
others stay in the kitchen,
So,
hiding
so
by
far we
preference under
understand,
pots or in the chimney
know everybody's age for
or
certain
broom
except
closet.
me.
They belong to the house, and
How
when
do
the
we find
family
it
who's
out?
lived
First,
there
I've
goes
seen a
away,
couple of people's
they
ages.
remain with the new
Does anybody want
tenants.
to tell me
Perhaps
how old
they
they
were
are?
already there
I'm
before
hearing
the
30,
house
I'm
existed.
hearing 30, I'm
Among the
hearing
weeds of the
30.
vacant
Great,
lot.
so we have 90 so far.
If the house is torn down and a
You
huge
think
block
that
of
I'm
50
90 years
families is
old?
built
Hang
in its
on, it gets
place,
even better.
they will be found
Are
multiplied
you sitting next to
in the
somebody in
kitchens
the
of that many
audience right now,
apartments.
and you're certain
To
of their
distinguish
age, but
between
you
the two
want to be
species, you will call
wrong?
the first one Penates
Yeah?
and the other one
Great, okay,
Leos.
so take the age that you know they are. Say your neighbor in your seat right now is exactly 42 years old, right? Great. Now all you have to do is take the number that we came up for my age before and subtract it from that one. That would make that person negative 50 or something.
Hey, Ethan. Hey, Ethan.
Yeah?
Are you done with your trick?
Yeah.
I have something for you. Hold on a sec. My hands are too sweaty to lower the microphone. At some point during the rehearsal process, Corey asked Ethan and I both to write down a list of places in Chicago that we knew existed and we had never been. And we both wrote down the homes that belonged to our grandfather's families on the south side of Chicago. And I'm just curious about other things that Ethan's and my grandfather might have in common. Hey, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
Did your grandfather teach you the concept of a lake bath, which is just swimming? Swimming and rubbing your armpits.
Claire, did your grandfather enjoy opera?
Yeah, he does. Ethan, after retiring, did your grandfather have you drink every day at 4:30?
Yes. Does your grandfather understand your art?
I think he does, and I think with the amount that he doesn't, he is very generously willing to accept it as what it is. Ethan, to members of your family, is the great blue heron a consistent reminder of his presence?
Yes. Did your grandfather prefer leather to other types of upholstery?
Yeah. Ethan, did your grandfather ever write a 2-page autobiography, then revise it by crossing out the names of his least favorite people?
Did your grandfather have a habit of erupting into song while walking down the street or sitting at the dinner table?
Ethan, does your grandfather take spiritual pride in the green beans from his garden?
Yes, very much. Did your grandfather love Cole Porter and by association the movie DeLovely, even though he usually has pretty scrupulous taste and that movie was really only okay?
Yeah.
All right, very good.
Wow, that's cool. Five, 6, 7, 8. These are some facts about Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Wright was born without a middle name in Millville, Indiana, on April 16, 1867. He grew up estranged from his father, a Baptist minister, and spent much of his youth learning under the tutelage of his mother, an experienced teacher. In late 1885, Wright was struck in the face by a hockey stick while playing an ice skating game with friends, resulting in the loss of his front teeth. He had been vigorous and athletic until then, and although his injuries did not appear especially severe, he became withdrawn. He had planned to attend Yale. Instead, he spent the next few years largely housebound. Finally, inspired by the National
Marsh was recently taken hostage. I have 3 older brothers who were all born at the old campus, where no one has ever been taken hostage to my knowledge. Geneva is about an hour west of Chicago in the Fox River Valley in King County. It's a quaint small city with a small tourist presence and a minor league baseball team, the King County Cougars. One of the Cougars' longtime 7th inning stretch entertainers, who called himself Myron Noodleman, recently passed away. Mayor Kevin Burns was recently re-elected to his 6th term.
I was born in a hospital I've never bothered to ask the name of, in a neighborhood we didn't stay in. We left Chicago in 1992 and moved 11 miles to the village of Oak Park, Illinois, a town walled by legacies of great men. To the north, Ernest Hemingway, and also to the north, Frank Lloyd Wright. Greatness shadows the village like the oceans.
I think there are 8 elementary schools in Geneva. Western Avenue, where I went, Coltrap, which was demolished a couple of years ago due to decades-long code violations and rebuilt elsewhere, Fabian Elementary, and a few others. Fabian Elementary is one of the...
I was born in Toledo, Ohio, in a hospital made entirely of glass. Toledo is sometimes called the Glass City. It was, at one point, the American epicenter for glass manufacturing. It maintains this legacy. The downtown is all glass buildings. No one throws stones. Here, he discovered his aesthetic by working in the architecture firm Alder.
Huge estate during his success after creating Riverbank Laboratories.
In 1889, Frank Lloyd Wright and his first wife, Catherine Tobin, moved
The Samuel Jones House, built in 1934 in Toledo. During the construction, the work pressed on Wright ideas that would later define his
During his
architecture.
success after creating Riverbank Laboratories, the first privately owned research company in the United States. Riverbank is now the place of
Asphalt reveals sandier asphalt reveals red brick, beneath which hide remnants of cobbles from the 1800s. In 1833, English mechanic Joseph Chaucer was pursuing sandier asphalt crushing down the trees, blowing into wind,
I remember going to a family day, touching the car by with 3 stockings, and eventually to always with the right, construction on the Jones house
in
starts
1833,
back up
English
and lasted 12 seconds before the wings gave way into rain.
So I started this piece about 4 years ago, what that was, it was about a month that I spent on a farm in Iowa. I had an artist studio in an old converted tofu factory, and I slept in a house that was maybe about 200 yards away. And I would stay up late into the night. I'd stay up, until 2 or 3 a.m. I would be working in the studio, and I would make the trek back to the home. This walk was very quick. It was like maybe a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. But I remember it very distinctly, and I remember it very distinctly on one particular night. And it was because it was overcast that night. And so none of the stars were out, and none of there was no light. So it was very, 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 very dark. I don't know if you've ever been in like a very rural space and like been outside at night for a long time, but it starts to be like really crazy. So there's this one night where it was very overcast and it was very dark. Just the trek about 200 yards from the artist studio to the house was this very surreal journey. And even though it was very flat land, as I was walking, I felt off balance. There's something so disorienting about that level of darkness. And knowing that we were doing this piece here, where we have blackout curtains, and I think that it is interesting to try that right now. I'm gonna get my. You guys all set? Cool. Yeah, are you all good? Okay, cool. Let's see. All right. Let's see how it goes. One. A fact. The Kansas Flint Hills are the geographic midpoint of the contiguous United States. 2. A fact. Flint, the mineral, is useful to start fires, but can fracture unpredictably when exposed to high temperatures. 3. A fact. At the geographic midpoint of the contiguous United States is a city, a middle city, a city of Flint, a middle city of Flint, where all the buildings are Flint, and all the cars are Flint, and all the people are Flint, and the whole thing could catch fire at any moment in the summer. The whole thing could split into 2, 3, 4, 1,000 parts if the sun hits it in the right way. There is no river in the middle city. There's no ocean, no lake. 4. A fact. Molly asks me about race riots in Chicago, and I realize I don't know the answer. I can tell you the founder of Chicago was Jean-Baptiste and that he was French-Haitian, he was black, but I can't remember what I've read. I look it up and this is what I find. Every day I swim in Lake Michigan. I'm swimming in the same lake where in 1919 a white man killed a black teenager for swimming on the wrong side of the beach, and for the week following, a riot. 5. A fact. The waterways of the Midwest are, arguably, one of the reasons for the country's prosperity in the 20th century. It's strange to think about, but true. The Midwest is largely navigable by river. 6. A fact. These waterways are not nearly as important as they used to be, economically speaking, I mean. 7. A fact. Lake Erie is experiencing algal blooms right now. If this gets bad enough, you can't drink the water in Toledo. 8. A fact. I grew up in southeastern Michigan, just across the border from Toledo. Michigan is my home state and is my head and my heart. Ohio is my borrowed state and is my stomach and my feet. If Lake Erie fills with algae, the taps in my childhood home have poison water coming out of them. 9. A fact.
I went to Kansas, I went to Iowa, I went to Ohio, I went back home to Michigan to find out if there's something connecting these places, these states, and not just how they voted in the last election. 10, a fact. There are places, and there are also lines between places. There are places, and there are stained glass windows shaped like those places. There are roads that will take you where you need to be, and so, outside my front door, Kent State, Ferguson, Gary, 11, a fact. Maybe to be Midwestern is to lock up all the fresh water, freeze it, let it plow the earth, let it get as far as here and then stop. Maybe Midwesternness is to be without, to have put all our water in glaciers, and we can't stop their motion across the earth. 12, a fact. Bill McBride lives out in the Flint Hills. Out behind his house is a railroad track, and out past the railroad track is a sculpture garden. It's overgrown prairie, no discernible path, you just walk out. The sculpture itself is reclaimed wood, posts about 6 feet tall, standing with nails coming out of them, watching like bewitched tall grass, a fence with no barbed wire, a house with no walls, the opposite of a maypole. I went out there to watch the sunset, and Bill came out to greet me. He said, being alive is like being in a house that's on fire. 13, a fact. He said, I can't manage a straight line. It's all here, then there. It's all this, everywhere. Everywhere is the Flint Hills, the midpoint. 14, a fact. I've never been to Flint, Michigan. I've never seen the Flint River. 15, a fact. It's a long way to the Mississippi from here. The Atlantic, even farther. 16, a fact. You can drink the water in Flint, Michigan. 17, a fact. In 2019, you should be able to drink the water in Flint, Michigan. 18, a fact. The Kansas Flint Hills are named for the flint that sits below the soil. They're named after Flint, the same Flint that made the land hard to plow, that encouraged everyone to move agriculture further east or south or north, and now the prairie of the Flint Hills is the most preserved prairie in the world. They're named after Flint, the same Flint that made the streams run clear, that brought mountain water to the prairie, that brought clear water, and the prairie house. 19, a fact. At the geographic midpoint of the contiguous United States is a city, a middle city, a city of Flint, a middle city of Flint, where all the buildings are Flint, and all the cars are Flint, and all the people are Flint, and the whole thing could catch fire at any moment in the summer. The whole thing could split into 2, 3, 4, 1,000 parts if the sun hits it in the right way. There's no water in the middle city, there's no river, there's no lake, only the Flint roads in and out of town. 20, a fact. There's no water in the middle city, but it's coming. It's coming soon. The rain that falls in the middle city hasn't come in 525 years. The rain that falls on the middle city falls everywhere, all here, then there, it's all this, then that, all falling and no falling everywhere curved, everywhere bent, everywhere the Flint Hills, and you stand where everywhere is, and the wonderful thing about a city is that it stands. And 1. The wonderful thing about time is that it's not like a grid. And 2, the wonderful thing about an ice tray is that you can fill it. And 3, the wonderful thing about absence, that you can fill it.
This is Union Pacific Clarinet Choir.
This is phone poles.
This is old tree.
Someday there will be no more phone poles, and you'll have to think of something else. You say, what about the lines between the phone poles? I say, there will be no more lines between phone poles. I know. You say, what about the pigeons? I say, there will still be pigeons. You say, where will they sit? I say, somewhere else. You say, maybe the pigeons will be dead. I say, there were pigeons. Before there were phone poles, the pigeons will be fine. I say, you say, we should leave the phone poles for the pigeons. You say we should leave the phone poles for the pigeons. Leave phone poles, leave pigeons, leave for.
The next part we do. The next part that we'd like to perform for you is a song. That's our song. The next part is a song.
Migratory patterns of birds. Migratory patterns of birds. Alone they go so far from home. Migratory patterns of birds. All the way to Argentina. All the way to Argentina. Alone they go so far from Michigan. All the way to Argentina. Yeah. You've got a lot of nerve. You've got a lot of nerve to come here and say you'll treat me this way. You've got a lot of nerve. Martyrs, sinners, and friends, they've abandoned our home again. So we bury ourselves in a prairie that's due to catch fire. Light the match and then walk away. You'll come back to here someday. Dead or alive, broken or tired, smoke to the top of the sky. Migratory patterns adore. Migratory patterns adore. To home, Jerusalem, home, Jerusalem. Migratory patterns adore you. Yeah.
You're so far from the wonder that maybe it's stillness is a movie.
Right, a list of types. Rolling, ancient, leaky, built over. Are you looking at that from the right side?
Is it actually impossible impossible to tell.
Well, we couldn't unplug from the main circuit. Do you want that in human time or in lake time?
Don't you recognize my voice?
No, you can't call that radicalism.
Is it just too
More
flattening?
from with and into it till the horror.
Could you
possibly
away?
Call it a map, call it a byway, call it a product of weather patterns, call it inborn, call it generational, call
Make
it
it worse. Will you press one for old time's sake? Has it really been that long? Is that really necessary? Can you give it an ace? Could you try? Does it matter that I don't think that's a good thing? Am I making you uncomfortable? Could you press one for old time's sake? Has it really been that
This is demonstration of the This is demonstration of the behavior of brown algae, which is evidence of a healthy biome at the mud level of a river, not evidence of a dirty river.
This is research process. When I was doing research for this piece, I met with a clairvoyant, and she told me that the Roby house was absolutely haunted.
Yeah, sure. Hey Claire, was your grandfather, is your grandfather, I'm sorry. Does your grandfather have brown hair?
I think he did when he was younger. Right now he doesn't have very much hair at all. Ethan, does your grandfather have a habit most of his life of hanging up the phone before the conversation was really over?
No, he's pretty good at that. Hey Claire, is your grandfather's name Ken?
No. Stories about how your grandfather hated dogs the whole time his kids were growing up, and now that he is older, he has a dog that he is obsessed with.
He kind of always liked dogs, all right.
I need to explain to you two things about the next part of the piece. The first thing that I need to explain to you about the next part of the piece is what you're listening to right now. This is a field recording that I took out in Iowa at a prairie called Baylor Prairie. Which is just to the northwest of Okoboji, Iowa. I had gone out there at around 6 a.m. to record what's called the Dawn Chorus.
This is Baylor Prairie. This is 7th Prairie. It's the 17th. Jameson Prairie.
which is the sound of all of the birds waking up in the morning. So what you're actually listening to is the sound of sunrise, the sound of sunrise in an Iowa prairie. The second thing I need to tell you about this next part of the piece is the text. The text is adapted from a Frank Lloyd Wright book called The Future of Architecture. At the back of the book is a glossary. That glossary, he provides his own definitions for different architectural terms. This is interesting because Wright wrote a lot when he was alive, and he is very prone to proselytizing and sort of like just saying nonsense over and over again. The glossary form, I think, helps him distill his ideas. So I think it's valuable to hear these out loud so that we might consider how they might apply to us today, what to discard, and what might be worth continuing. Definitions. 1. The word organic denotes in architecture not merely what may hang in a butcher shop, get about on 2 feet, or be cultivated in a field. The word organic refers to entity. Perhaps integral or intrinsic would therefore be a better word to use. As originally used in architecture, organic means part to whole as whole is to part. Entity as integral. Intrinsic. 2. Tradition. We may have many traditions just as truth may have many truths. The genus bird may fly away as flocks of infinitely differing birds of almost unimaginable variety, all of them merely derivative. Flocks of tradition may proceed to fly from generic tradition into unimaginable many. Perhaps none have creative capacity because all are only derivative. 3. Horizon. The intrinsic and defining entity of the Midwestern landscape. As the previous style holds classicism to be mythic, we must, in response, create our own mythology, moving. Past our immediate circumstance, we see the meeting of land and sky beyond time or infinity. Let the marker be this line, the long, drifting, horizontal truth, a divinity in architecture. 4. Romance. Poetry of form is as necessary to great architecture as foliage is to the tree, or seeds to the plant, flesh to the body, because sentimentality ran away with this. Human need and negation is now abusing it. No good reason for this. The sentimental to take the forest from the trees outside, to take the thing, blue skies, and romance for the thing. 5. Form follows function. This is a much abused slogan. Naturally, form does so. The term is only useful as indicating the platform upon which architectural form rests. As the skeleton is no finality of human form any more than grammar is the finality of human form, any more than grammar is the form of poetry, just so function
is to architectural form. Rattling the bones is not architecture. Less is only more. When more is no good form, predicated by function, form is so far as poetic imagination can go without destruction. Transcends it. Blue, right, blue, heart, and more of the thing, not by it, of the thing, not on it. Form follows function has become a stock phrase. Only when we write, form and function are one, is the slogan significant. Blue, right, blue, heart, and more to the skeleton of the thing. Little form is only more where any more would be no good. Of the thing, not by it. Of the thing, not on it. Of the thing, not more like little weeds, like little plastic cups. It is now the password for ornament. And ornament is to architecture as efflorescence of a tree is to its structure. Emotional in its nature, ornament is, if well conceived, not only the poetry, but is the character of the structure revealed and enhanced. If well conceived, architecture is destroyed by ornament. Only when we linger, say of the thing, not by it, say the continual becoming, say blue, right, blue, say sand, right, blank Venus, say form and function are one, right, horizon, right, heart, say romance, right, bones. A little hearsay from the past, a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which has wings shall tell the matter. Springs do not come from above to be suspended there by skyhooks or set up on posts. Contrary to popular belief, the third dimension is not thickness, but its depth. Used in organic architecture to indicate the sense of depth with issues as of the thing, not on it. The third dimension exists as intrinsic to building. As a bird of the air shall carry the voice in that. Which has wings shall tell the matter laughter, then imagination, right blue, right heart, and more of the skeleton of thing, receding things, essential, recede, form, recede, invisible, able, blue. 6. Space, the breath of a work of art. Right, blue, right, blue. Right, blue, 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 right.
Blue. The plains, Charlie. Land. That grass around bode, so shrilly river it glitter. There, all nodding heat, and insects butterprint, quartz muscadine, and AM cast trembling. Windbreak. 1. A horizon beam. Old ragweed. Wildhead, goldenrod, and lamb's quarter. And from morning soft trees, a past sky of weeping and oat, a wild nut grass, high spine cabbage, standing we the shadow, still. Like simmer and rust, sunflower, flannel shirt down river, the stays seams chondrite breeze creeping gently your dandelion, where fields toy all and butcher dew serious with the day. Place tobacco brown coins in the volunteer windbreak's business, all schist nodding. Is Jimson weed, in and of insects, electric granite, nightshade, sunshine, blacktop, an invaginate shattercane, sawbriar, canted brothers, mother's more, business on fired mint, vetch, the ale-colored overhang, the iron shapeless, past cheek, all rigid sounds graph starlings wear through foxtail scabs time. Look, the untilled horses, all sunlight, no cut grass, and all water's arrow, its pale fore distance in the skylines, hand of beyond they beyond. Past the flannel plains and blacktop graphs and skylines of canted rust, and past the tobacco-brown river overhung with weeping trees, and coins of sunlight through them on the water-down river, to the place beyond the windbreak, where untilled fields shimmer shrilly in the AM heat, shattercane, lamb's quarter, cut grass, sawbriar, nutgrass, jimson weed, wild mint, dandelion, foxtail, muscadine, spine cabbage, goldenrod, creeping Charlie, butterprint, nightshade, ragweed, wild oat, vetch, butcher grass, invaginate volunteer beans, all heads, nodding gently in a morning breeze like a mother's soft hand on your cheek. An arrow of starlings fired from the windbreak's thatch, a glitter of dew that stays where it is and seems all day. A sunflower, 4 more, 1 bowed, and horses in the distance standing rigid and still as toys, all nodding. Electric sounds of insects at their business, ale-colored sunshine and pale sky, and whirls of cirrus so high they cast no shadows. Insects all business, all the time. Quartz and chert and schist and chondrite iron scabs and granite. Very old land. Look around you. The horizon trembling, shapeless. We are all of us brothers. Some crows overhead then, 3 or 4, not a murder on the wing, silent with intent. Corn bound for the pasture's wire, beyond which your shoes brand, incised in the dew, an alfalfa breeze. Saxe spurs, dry scratching inside a culvert. Rusted wire and tilted posts, more a symbol of restraint than a fence per se. No hunting. The shush of the interstate off past the windbreak. The pasture's crows standing at angles, turning up patties to get at the worms underneath, the shapes of the worms, incised in the overturned dung, and baked by the sun all day until hardened. There to say, tiny vacant lines and rows, and inset curls that do not close, because head never quite touches tail. Read these blue, the plains, land, that grass, bowed, so river glitter, there, all nodding heat, and butterprint, quartz, and AM trembling windbreak, one, a horizon beam, old wild head's goldenrod, and from the morning soft trees a sky of weeping and oat, the wild nut grass, standing high, still. Like the simmering rusted sunflower downriver, the breeze creeping gently your dandelion, where fields all butchered dew serious with the day. Tobacco brown coins in the windbreak, all nodding. Electric granite, nightshade, the sunshine, and blacktop, and chattercane, sawbriar, and canted brothers, mother's more, fired mint, the ale-colored overhang, the iron shapeless, past cheek, all rigid sounds, graph starlings, where through foxtail looks at time. The untilled sunlight, no cut grass, and all water's arrow, its pale fore distance in the skylines. Hand of beyond reed. Read these. Blue. 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 bright spring, heart and cups, bright blue, bright spring, heart and little cups, bright blue, bright spring, heart and little cups, bright blue, bright spring, heart and reread little plastic cups, bright blue, spring, right, heart and reread little plastic cups, blue, bright spring, right, heart and reseed like little plastic cups, blue, bright spring, right, heart and recede like little plastic cups, blue linger, heart and recede like little plastic cups, new like blue, bright heart and recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new like blue, like heart and recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new, bright blue, bright heart and sand, recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new, bright blue, bright heart and sand, recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new, bright blue, bright heart and sand and recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new, bright blue, bright heart and sand and flower, recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, new, bright blue, bright heart and sand and pipe, recede like little weeds like little plastic cups, bright blue, bright spring, heart and sandpiper, like little flower, like little plastic cups, bright blue, bright spring, heart and sandpiper, like little flower, like little plastic cups, blue, bright spring, bright heart and sandpiper, like little reeds, like little plastic cups, blue, bright spring, bright heart and sandpiper, like little plastic cups, blue linger, heart and sandpiper, recede like little plastic cups, blue linger, heart and sandpiper, reeds, blue linger, heart and sandpiper, reeds, blue linger, heart, sandpiper, reeds, blue, heart,
This is the Fleeto War in 1 minute.
This is synchronized swimming in the Wisconsin Dells, but they've completely dried out.
This is, I never properly learned to play any musical instruments.
Everybody, listen up. Shake it like you just don't care. Never mind your friends. Girl, it ain't no sin to strip right down to your underwear. Say everybody,
Everybody,
screw the masses. You only want to have some fun. Do whatever you want. Wear lingerie to a restaurant. Police ain't got no gun. You don't have to run. Everybody say ooh, ooh. Alright, alright. Dance, music, sex, romance. Everybody say ooh, ooh. Alright, alright. Dance, music, sex, romance. I don't want to be a poet, 'cause I don't want to blow it. I don't want to win awards. All I want to do is dance, play music, sex, romance, and try my best to never get bored. If you feel alright, let me hear you scream. Ah! Dance,
dance,
music,
music,
sex,
sex,
romance,
Romance.
everybody dance,
Dance.
music,
music,
sex,
Sex.
romance,
Romance.
everybody dance,
Dance.
music,
Music.
sex,
Sex.
romance,
Romance.
everybody dance,
Dance.
music,
Music.
sex,
Sex.
romance,
Romance.
everybody ooh,
Ooh.
alright,
Alright.
dance, music, sex, romance. I love you guys. Okay, full honesty, we planned that one. I promise all the other ones, like, we did do randomly, except for that one, we knew we wanted to do that one for you. This feels as good as a time as ever to confess another thing to you, which is that we have told you some things in the show that are factually inaccurate. And in the interest of honesty,
the World's Fair opened in March, not February. Frank Lloyd Wright never built the Debs house. The Debs house is entirely fictional. It did not fall into the Kalamazoo River because it did not exist. Frank Lloyd Wright never swore off the prairie style, although he did move to Europe in 1914 and his style did evolve away from the prairie style. I've read a few books about Frank Lloyd Wright's life, but I keep getting bored. I'm not actually interested in elevating him or his work that much. I just want to take his ideas. Wright was not born on that date. That's Wilbur Wright. He was not struck in the head by a hockey stick. That was Wilbur. Inspired by the national bicycle craze. That was Wilbur. He did not invent a wind tunnel. That was Wilbur. He was not the first person to fly. That was Wilbur. He did not build a house in a Dayton suburb. That was Wilbur. Frank Lloyd Wright did not invent the airplane. That was Wilbur. The Kansas Flint Hills are not the geographic midpoint of the contiguous United States. It's a contested location, but it's somewhere near the Nebraska-Kansas border. The Flint Hills are not there. I did not go to Kansas or Iowa or Ohio.
I'd like to ask some questions. Did I make this piece just to shape the Midwest into my image? It's certainly easier to say I belong here when I get to decide what here means. Or, let me try again. Why is it that my long-standing idea of Midwesternness is in conflict with other parts of me? Another way, if I tell you I'm queer, does that make me less from here? If I tell you I'm from Toledo, a Rust Belt town, does that make me more Midwestern or less? If I tell you I'm from Toledo, an almost rural town, does that make me more Midwestern or less? What about Chicago, Storm Lake, Iowa, St. Louis? And by that, I mean, is this Midwestern? And what if I say it is? What then? I've spent 4 years working on this piece, and I'm at a loss. How do we argue for all places at once? How do we fight when every place is beautiful and every place is so incredibly flawed? How do we build lines between Chicago and Matfield Green, Detroit and Grinnell? Why is it that Chicago feels like home and Temperance feels like home, and I have a friend raised in Evanston who's lived in Illinois or Michigan their entire life, but does not feel Midwestern? What does that say about here? What is here? What if I told you that friend was black? Would that change something for you? How about 28 more questions? What does a glacier make? What does a city make? What do groups of people make? Do they make landscapes? Is a landscape a lake or a prairie? Is a landscape a prairie house or is it redlining? Is a landscape a region or is it the whole country? I keep coming back to this. Why is our region synonymous with whiteness? What is here and how do we find that word? How do we change a midpoint? And furthermore, can a place hold many things and still be one place? If you observe something, can you be that thing? What would it mean to propose a new sort of Midwest? What would it mean to look at our history, really look at it, and consider it? Do you remember Haymarket, or the Rainbow Coalition, or the teachers' strike, or the bunkhouse? Do you remember the top of this show? The Kansas populists lock themselves in a door for a night. Could we do that for an idea? Could we take the word Midwestern and hold it until they pry it from us? Can we take it, bend it until it becomes something new? Can a region be a river, an ideal? What would it mean to build a house into the land, not just on it? What would it mean to build a house into the land, not just on it? What would it mean to build a house into the land, not just on it? What if I tell you I have no more questions left?
That's Wilbur Wright. He was born with the middle name Lincoln. Wilbur was not inspired by the national bicycle craze. That was Wilbur. He did not invent a wind tunnel. That was Wilbur. He was not the first person to fly. That was Wilbur. He did not build a house in a Dayton suburb. That was Wilbur. Frank Lloyd Wright did not invent the airplane. That was Wilbur Wright. The Kansas Flint Hills are not the geographic midpoint of the contiguous United States. It's a contested location, but it's somewhere near the Nebraska-Kansas border.
We know that humans migrated to North America because of an ice age. We put all of the ocean in a glacier and crossed the continents. While we settled ourselves, the ice melt began to paint the new watersheds, the St. Lawrence and the Mississippi, the land bridge falling under as the Great Lakes filled.
To slow the transmission of Dutch elm disease, foresters will girdle the trunk of a tree, removing a strip of bark from around the entire circumference. Eventually, the tree will die above the girdle line. My grandmother's longtime boyfriend cuts a piece of birch bark from a tree in the woods outside her house. He sings a prayer to the tree. He cuts a strip 3/4 of the way around the trunk. He explains that as long as you leave a vertical strip intact, the tree will be okay.
A friend of mine calls from California and says she desperately wants a winter. She's from Chicago and knows what winter means. A friend from Montana agrees with me about the sky and the thunderstorms over Lake Michigan. Where we disagree, however, is if a tornado could ever strike downtown Chicago.
It's not metal, and it's not a march, it's not a diversion, and it's not scenery. It's a person that built a monument that took so long to build it that the new trees planted for the forest preserve grew to maturity and completely engulfed it. The trees surround it now, but there's still a couple of pieces that glint when the sun hits it, especially brightly in the winter. That way you don't actually have to feel like you're walking through the trees, but you can still write and call it a forest. It's not metal anyway, it's actually painted porcelain.
I grew up next door to Tornado Alley, and I remember waiting in the basement for that delicate finger of wind, and I promise this isn't pessimism and is also not fear. Alabama, Idaho, Illinois, Minnesota, Texas, Vermont, and West Virginia all claim the monarch butterfly as the state butterfly. Michigan, in its state tourism advertising, declares itself the summer home of the monarch.
In an attempt to stop the fungus from spreading further, an elm tree plugs its own xylem tissue, cutting off the transmission of nutrients. It is this, not the fungus, that kills the tree. After white settlers demolished local economies, many Ojibwe and other native communities turned to income from selling crafts to tourists. Leather, beadwork, birch bark.
The monarch butterflies that live east of the Rockies migrate south in the winter. Their lifespan is short, so it takes 4 or 5 generations to complete the trip. They all congregate in the same handful of locations in Mexico, entire trees covered by butterflies. We don't know why or how they do this, whether it's genetic memory or an internal map or something else entirely. They all come back, though.
It's a place that's perpetually 4 a.m., but only if your feet are completely still. Take one step backwards and it's 3:58. Do you know what I mean? I heard there are these easy songs initially planted far away from you on purpose, so that you don't learn them too early and overestimate their meanings. I tried one at 1 a.m. and felt a mix of lustfulness and nausea. I was told I needed some rest for 3 or so more hours. It wasn't a march or a fight song, by the way, it was more of a ballad.
For instance, consider the upland sandpiper. It winters in Argentina, but otherwise spends a lot of time near Lake Michigan, just north of Chicago.
I tell a friend from Ohio about this piece, and I ask her if she feels Midwestern. Absolutely, she says.
I read somewhere that the Midwest is the place you grow up, move away from, fly over, and then ask to be buried in.
There's a vote going up soon, a town referendum. 25 wind turbines to be put up in the hills. Exactly 1/3 of the population votes against it.
I received the chrysalises in the mail when I was maybe 8 or 9. When the butterflies finally came out, they sat very still. Sugar water in a little plastic cup.
I ask my friend if she can explain why she feels Midwestern. She responds, pie.
I don't remember if we released them outside. I think we did. Bubble wrap package, born in Temperance, Michigan, and it knows where Mexico is, presumably. And then how to get back. I meet someone at a party who just moved here from New York. He says, I just can't stop writing about Kalamazoo. And I ask why. He says, I grew up there.
So I suggest we vote to put up the turbines and take away the hills. That way no one can say they moved here for the view, and if they do say it, it means something different. My suggestion is ignored, and they vote instead to say that every time somebody utters the word town, the rest of your sentence must suddenly progress at a slower rate and feels natural.
I ask, what about Kalamazoo? And he says, I'm transitioning. The Pfizer plant that makes my testosterone is currently polluting the Kalamazoo River. I tell him, I fell in love once with a person from Kalamazoo. And he says, it's easy to do. I tell him I'm working on this piece, and I tell him I'm imagining a building that could be a bird leaning over to drink the water. And he says, the river floods sometimes, and lets you start again. It's painful at first, but it gives you the chance. It's painful, but it's easy to do, or at least easier than you think.
I learned to bead. I buy moccasins and given a birch bark flower vase. Driving along an unfamiliar road, he comments that the street signs in every major U.S. city look the same. I return to this place and I wonder, how can you love a place that has no sense of its own history? With my grandmother, I make a bracelet, but I don't want to include the chevron pattern. I don't like how it looks.
Here's a question I have. What is organic architecture? Wright writes about it a lot, but makes buildings look like houses. And I wonder about architecture that is organic and doesn't look like a house. Something that is tall grass, not just on top of it. And I think about downtown Chicago, and I think about Marina City, those corncob buildings on the river. And here's something. If you're sad and a little drunk, and you sit and you watch the Marina Tower buildings, they look unbelievably happy. Like they're dancing for you, like they're smiling at you, like the whole thing makes sense for a little while.
And it's not a diversion, though. It's a sidestep, and sidesteps can be danced with composure and purpose. And I think I've been staring at your face for 8 years now, and I still don't know if your ears are pierced. Maybe it's just 8 uninterrupted minutes, but it feels very long. I can't give it a list of all the things I've called you in private and be rid of the list myself. I've made too many copies, and too many of those copies are permanent. If 2 bright red lights come on at the same time, will you tell me that they shut off at the same time too? Doesn't matter if it's true or not. I'll have my back turned on purpose, and after that you can tell me whether or not your ears are pierced. It's important to tell me the truth about that.
In 1957, Wright proposed the building of a mile-high skyscraper in downtown Chicago. He rolled out a mock-up drawing that stretched from the ceiling to the floor of the Sherman House Hotel ballroom. This design was never built. The reason? It just didn't make any sense. Just for reference, the current tallest building in the world is just over half a mile tall. And here, in 1957, Wright proposed building a mile high. And he called it the Illinois. And admittedly, I love the thought of a world where Illinois is the tallest word around.
I memorize my new address and zip code as soon as it arrives in the mail. I ask the names of the plants in my backyard and I forget them. I try not to step on snails. When in public and away from people I know, I let myself slip into an accent that isn't mine. Lake Michigan, Elsie Lake, the Bath Canal, the Key, the hot springs, coarse sand and graffiti, toads by the garage, houseboats, swans, the smell of sulfur. I cut my hair in front of the bedroom mirror and I can't get all of the clippings out from between the floorboards. 3 spiders live in the corners of my windows. The top spider in the right corner is winning. The shell is surprisingly delicate. The sound of the crunch is the kind you feel in your teeth. I try not to hear it. The windows have no screens, but I open them anyway.
The treetops turn to red first. You fly over and it looks like fall. Underneath, it's still spring. I imagine the first human being finding Lake Superior, traversing the northern edge of the mountains, the plains, and the land a continent wide, and then water. The memory of the frigid northern ocean, and a realization it's not salty, but clear.
And it's not scenery I want to be committed to, it's the horizon, and I want to pronounce it. And it's painted porcelain, and it's a ballad, and it's a sidestep, and it's the horizon.
You can drink it. What that must have felt like. To be in a place that gave you so much. A muscle the size of your fist sees all the blood you use to stay alive. Maybe it's the first time someone saw a stalk of corn standing above the tall grass. The skyscraper a mile high, an ear stepping closer to it, green in its shell, an offer to the enormous sky above, thrust, blue, as far above the ground as it can muster. Bright blue, heart and more to the skeleton of the thing, the grass scratching at your hip. Here, a flower but not a flower. Here, oysters in a place that used to be glacial, used to be all frozen up, and peeling back the green. Did we have a word for this? Did we have a word for yellow, green, opal, call it maize, bright flint, bright crop, call it blue. Having no idea what will come next. The people who will walk gently, the people who will lay tracks, mill steel, LeBron James, John Deere in the swamps, Lake Erie in the tile, the people who will arrive on the shore with guns, the hinterlands, the breadbasket, the pipelines, the rivers, the cities, the irrigation, the skies, cornucopia, Thanksgiving, Detroit, Kent State, Waterlove, Ferguson, Fargo, fire, Sleeping Bear, migration, Monsanto, gods, moving, lightning, shouting Port Huron, shouting Lakeshore Drive, we're here, water life, and then shouting keep your arms locked together, shouting walk towards my voice, shouting the sun, the sun, the sun, its harp in the shape of an ear. It's rough on the outside, but on the inside, its seeds are sweet. Not on, but of the place, the lake and this, like a steeple above the plains.